Poring over textbook after textbook wasn't an uncommon way for YN to spend her evening. However, she usually did it in the comfort of her own home, rather than in a quiet cafe, accompanied by a brash yet pretty boy by the name of Bakugou Katsuki. Bakugou wasn't someone she was overly familiar with. Of course, she knew of him. His loud voice and spunky attitude was hard to miss, even in a class of 100 students. Plus, they had some common friends. He had always stood out to her despite his prickly exterior. He was one of the most intelligent students in the class, one of her rivals. Yet she was vaguely drawn to him. So, when the professor declared that he would be assigning a group project, she silently hoped they would be paired together. Now, why and did not have feelings for Bakugo? No, that wasn't the case. She was merely curious about the hot-headed pretty boy who always seemed to come head to head with her for top marks. The gods must have been feeling kind, or maybe the randomizer the professor used to create the pairs was working in her favor. But her lips morphed into a smile as she listened to the list of groups: Bakugo Katsuki and YNLN. She glanced at him, flashing a friendly grin in his direction. When he when she caught his eye, his silent scoff didn't deter her. She wanted to know what was so special about this particular student. Despite their not so pleasant initial meeting, where he frustratedly berated her, making his hatred for group projects well known, they had ended up sitting shoulder to shoulder at the cozy cafe Bakugo worked at. Seeing him in such a welcoming environment, a forced smile painted on his face as he served customers, was almost surprising. Only almost though, as she suspected there was something more to him buried deep under the hardened shell he wore. As his eyes fell on her figure and the friendly smile she sent his way, his brow twitched. Right, they had to work on that stupid project together. YN settled at the comfortable spot in the corner. It was Bakugo's favorite, but that wasn't important. Spreading her textbooks across the table and getting to work as she waited for Bakugo to clock out. Her concentration was broken by a chair scraping the floor and a steaming mug being pushed her way. She glanced up at the gruff man in front of her. "For me?" she asked, referring to the coffee. There was the brow twitch again. He rolled his eyes. "Obviously, dumbass. I have my own, don't I?" She only barely stopped the small laugh from slipping from her lips. "Thank you." "Yeah, whatever, idiot. What are you doing, anyways?" His tone was as aggressive as always, though the tips of his ears were dusted with a pretty shade of pink. Biting her tongue, she nudged the book towards him. "I've drafted up the rough outline. I shared it with you earlier." Later on, "Thanks for helping me out with that section earlier, Bakugo." Her enthusiasm would have been infectious towards anyone else, but he only sighed. "Yeah, whatever. Call it call if you need anything else, dumbass, but try not to call, obviously." "Mm-hmm. I'll see you soon," she grinned. "Yeah, yeah, get going already. Get some rest when you get home, by the way, idiot. You look tired as shit. Stay safe or whatever." And so the routine began. A few times each week, YN would come to the cafe with her laptop and her textbooks, sitting in the same spot each time. She didn't question why it was always free despite the business of the cafe. Hearing the familiar screech of the chair scraping the floor and the smell of a warm coffee wafting to her nose each time, Bakugo would sink into his seat, looking increasingly exhausted every time. It alarmed her. Of course it did. Bakugo was perfect, wasn't he? He went to bed so early. How could he let himself get to the point of complete exhaustion? Katsuki, are you alright? I told you not to call me that, dumbass. I'm fine. Why the hell wouldn't I be, idiot? His eyes glared into her worried ones, though she didn't notice them soften ever so slightly when her face fell and she averted her gaze. Uh, um, sorry, Bakugo. You just look very tired and I was worried about you. He rolled his eyes. I'm fine, stupid. Come on, let's get to work, so we can get out of here. We. He hadn't said that before. YN caught his slip up and she caught the way his eyes grew in size ever so slightly. Holding her words back, she nodded and pushed the textbook between them. A little later, it's getting dark. Pack your shit up, dumbass. YN only nodded silently, bookmarking important pages before sliding the books along with her laptop into her bag. Gazing out the window for a moment, she noted that Bakugo was right. It was dark. On top of that, it had started snowing. Bracing herself for the cold that would snip her skin the moment she left the warmth of the cafe, she failed to notice Bakugo shrugging off his jacket until he grabbed her wrist. Oi, stupid, why didn't you bring a fucking coat? You know how damn cold it gets nowadays. What if you ended up getting sick? His caring words were glazed over by his sharp tone as he threw the jacket around her shoulders. Let's go. It's not getting any damn lighter down there, idiot. Hey Bakugo, thanks for walking me home. Katsuki. He had looked up at that moment. He would have noted the momentary look of shock plastered on her face before she regained her composure and smiled sweetly instead. Well, thank you, Katsuki. Neither of them had noticed the wind picking up nor the increasingly heavy snowfall during their small talk. However, the peaceful and calming snowfall quickly morphed into a blizzard as the wind howled into their ears. YN fumbled with her keys as she unlocked the door, ushering Bakugo in with her before slamming it shut. The warmth of the apartment complex flooded their senses for a moment before Bakugo glared at her. What was that for, dumbass? You think I'm going to let you walk home in that? She exclaimed, pointing out the window. Well, what do you expect me to do then, idiot? He snarled. Are you stupid? Come on. Grasping his wrist, she dragged him up the flight of stairs and unlocked her apartment. Despite his huffy attitude, Bakugo's cheeks grew warm, and it wasn't from the heater. Unlocking the door to her cozy apartment, YN pulled him inside. There was no denying the pair had grown much closer than either of them had expected during the couple months they had worked together. Bakugo felt strangely comfortable in her presence. not hesitating to throw his own backpack down on the floor while placing hers on the couch, careful as to not damage the laptop inside. He examined the room. It was much cleaner than he expected. Neatly organized books lined the shelves. Soft pillows were strewn across the enticingly plush sofa. A few well cared for plants adorned the windowsills, and an oddly familiar feeling painting hung from the wall. He couldn't make out what exactly it was, but he was no stranger to the atmosphere, the lighting, and the feeling it evoked in his chest. The flash of pale yellow caught his eye, but he chose not to dwell on it much longer. In that moment, he wanted nothing more than to sink into the damp sofa, wrapped up in blankets, with her. The snowfall didn't seem to be letting up whatsoever. In fact, it seemed to only be getting heavier. YN noticed it too, taking a moment to gaze out to the frosty window as she turned the lamp on. Katsuki? Her voice was hesitant. Hmm? The weather's not getting any better. Do you want to just stay the night instead? I don't want you going out there when it's snowing like that. Her words grew quieter as she spoke, as if she was almost afraid of his response. Bakugou only let out a long sigh, though he couldn't deny that her concern caused a warm feeling in his chest. Avoiding her eyes, he ponders his options for a short moment before responding with, "I'll take the couch." She nodded, shooting him a sweet smile, grateful that he chose to stay instead. When she left to grab blankets for him, she couldn't stop thoughts from swirling in her head. Since when did she care about this stupid hot-headed pretty boy? Was it because he brought her coffee each time they worked on the project? Or because he has lent her his jacket? Or was it because he smiled at her in a way that she had never seen him smile before? Or maybe because despite the insults he hurled her way, he talked to her in an unusually soft tone. Was there a chance that he liked her back? Wait, since when did she even like him? Of course, he was intelligent, he was pretty, but she couldn't recall when he shifted from an object of her curiosity to something more. She shook her head, attempting to clear her mind as she gathered blankets along with a soft t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants. Multiple sizes too large for her and guaranteed to fit him comfortably. "Hey, here." She handed him the clothes and nodded towards the bathroom. "Go change, and I'll set up the sofa. Alright?" Before he had a chance to insist he could manage it, YN had nudged him towards the door and turned her back. Laying out the blankets, grumbling something under his breath, he obliged. In the bathroom, it occurred to him that the clothes she handed him most definitely were not her size. They were pleasantly fresh, faintly smelling of various spices and small hints of cinnamon, a smell familiar to him by now, comforting even. The idea that they may not belong to her burned his mind though. Sure, she had never mentioned a boyfriend, but then again, she wasn't obligated to. Why was he so concerned anyways? It was none of his business whether she had a boyfriend or not. Even though she grinned so sweetly at him as she high-fived him so enthusiastically whenever they got a section of their project done, making him feel like they were the only ones that matter in this world. And her voice dripped with so much worry when she asked him to stay. He glared at the mirror, cursing himself for letting her worm her way into his heart. Shaking the thoughts from his head, he changed into the clothes she gave him, letting the soothing scent swathe him for a mere moment before pushing his way out of the door and back into the living room. Seeing her comfortably seated on the edge of the sofa, he couldn't restrain his curiosity. Why do you even have clothes that fit me, idiot? His voice wobbled just slightly, going unnoticed by YN, which he was grateful for. Oh, she rubbed her neck sheepishly before continuing. Oversized stuff is just more comfy, you know? These are yours? Yeah, I live alone. Who else's would they be? She sounded confused, but her words made Bakugo release a short-lived breath of relief. But they were hers, not a boyfriend's or an ex's or a friend's. Hers. He took he shook his head, disregarding her question. As she opened her mouth to speak again, the lamp flickered before the pair was enveloped in darkness. Bakugo let a long string of curses fall from his lips as YN whispered out a well shit. Fumbling around for her phone, she turned on the flashlight and left the room for a moment, returning with an armful of candles and a box of matches. Spreading them around the room, she lit them one by one before returning to the couch with a content sigh. And in Bakugo's opinion, she seemed oddly unfazed by the power outage. You alright, Katsuki? Do you need anything? He froze. Of course he needed something. He needed her in his arms. But how the hell was he supposed to tell her that? So he settled for a shake of his head as she bid him good night, returning to her room. Bakugo was restless. No matter how comfortable and plush the sofa was, or how soft the blankets he gave him were, he could not fall asleep. Sitting up, he buried his head in his hands, desperate to simply erase the thoughts running through his head at 100 miles a minute. He almost never had problems sleeping. What was the issue this time? He knew, of course, that was the problem. That was the girl who snagged his heart was only a room away, yet so far from him at the same time. But he wasn't about to admit that. Too distracted by trying to calm his racing mind, he failed to notice the footsteps padding towards him until YN stood directly in front of him. Can't sleep? He confirmed her speculations with a nod. Me neither. The blanket draped over her shoulders suddenly cloaked him as well, as she sat down beside him. Wanna talk? About? Anything. We have time after all. It's not getting any lighter out there anytime soon, and neither of us can sleep. Plus, I'm pretty sure that after the snowstorm like this, classes are gonna be called off tomorrow anyways. He nodded, leaning back into the sofa, pulling her back with him by the blanket they shared. A little later, as they talked, Bakugou's arm had somehow snaked its way around her, and she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. She recounted dumb memories about the ridiculous things her friends dragged her into, only to get cut off by a yawn, which was very cute, but Bakugou would never admit that. Tired, huh? Just a little. Get some sleep. As she rose to return to her room, Bakugou scoffed. Dumbass, I meant here. Lay down. His words caused a sleepy smile to cross her lips. Might as well sleep in the bed then. Come on, Siki. Her hand reached for his wrist as she pulled him from the sofa and clumsily led him into her room instead. But she was too distracted. No, but he was too distracted by the idea that she gave him a nickname and that she was okay with sharing a bed with him. Had it been anyone but her, he would have been angry, berating them for calling him anything other than Bakugou and for suggesting such an intimate act. The implications of her actions hadn't even occurred to her until she had settled on the bed, while Bakugou shuffled uncomfortably in the door frame. She pulled back her comforter and patted the spot beside her, inviting him to join. She would deal with the consequences, and the likely lecture that would be incoming about inappropriate behavior in the morning. Hesitantly, he crawled in, but put as much space as he could possibly muster between them, laying flat on his back, his body completely rigid. Somehow I doubt that's comfortable. YN snickered sleepily as she pressed her arm to her warm body against him, resting her hand on his chest. Is this okay? A strangled sounding noise left his lips when he opened his mouth to speak. After clearing his throat, he let himself wrap his arms around her and pull her closer. Yeah, it's okay. Though his voice was gruff, his tone was soft, gentle even. Nobody would believe her if she told them that Bakugou Katsuki was capable of being gentle. Her eyes flickered towards his face as she let out a satisfied hum. You're pretty comfy, you know. Shut up and go to sleep already. Despite his defensive words, she could feel the heat rushing to his cheeks at her statement. She stifled a giggle. Fine, fine. Night, Suki. Sleep well, dummy. She fell asleep to the sound of his soft, measured breaths, and the thought that he called her dummy, not idiot, not dumbass, not stupid, dummy. Maybe she had grown on him after all. With the rising sun came a blaring alarm, an email from the school notifying students that classes would, in fact, be cancelled, and a fresh sheet of blinding snow on the ground outside. Fumbling about for her phone to silence the obnoxious sound, she realized that the alarm wasn't hers, but rather Bakugou's. Reaching for his phone, she quickly silenced it, allowing herself to snuggle back into the comfort of his arms. Perfectly still, Bakugou has sleepily watched her search around for the phone. He had trouble keeping his eyes open even after the ruckus. The warmth of the bed and the presence beside him, lulling him back into a sleepy state. A content expression was painted on her face as she adjusted herself in his arms, his half-lidded eyes catching her own. "Morning, Suki," she whispered with a serene smile, almost as if she was afraid to ruin the perfect tranquility of the moment. He surprised both her and himself when he found himself pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, as if it was second nature to him. She giggled quietly when Bakugo froze, realizing what he had done. Rather than mocking him for it, though, her warm fingertips instead found their way onto his cheek, and her lips onto his jaw, a pretty smile gracing her face as she lay her head on his chest again. His heart thumped. No words were exchanged as Bakugo smoothed her hair down, the back of his hand gently brushing against her cheek and jaw. Truth be told, his touch was far gentler than she expected, especially after noting his calloused fingertips. The silence, however, was broken by a barely audible whisper. "Honestly, I could stay like this forever." "Me too." Extended ending. "So, Suki, how long have I been your lock screen for?" "What the hell? You weren't supposed to see that, dumbass." Hey guys, so that was Snowstorm, Bakugou X Listener. It's a college AU, and I hope you realize that. I mean, it's written in the what do you call that? I don't know, some sort of background. Yes. Anyway, um, I hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as I enjoyed reading it when I did. Um, and I hope I see you in the next video. Oh yeah, speaking of the next video, I'm not sure what to do next. I have some writing to do still, but I'm far from gone. I mean done. Ugh, can't speak. I'm far from done. And no one's really been asking for things to read recently. Like no one's been requesting. I hope I could see some requests here, especially since I don't really know what to do with this channel. It's just for fun. And yeah, so far we have 40 subscribers. Like, whoa, 40 subscribers. I didn't think that this channel would even have subscribers at all. But like, thank you so much for y'all who gave me a chance. It means a lot. It really does. I don't show it, and uh, but it does mean a lot. Uh, Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling now, and I'm just gonna let it fade out. Okay, bye bye.